The piercing sound of the siren cut through Boston's freezing dawn like a blade. Elena Rodriguez adjusted the stethoscope around her neck as she ran through the corridors of Massachusetts General Hospital, her white sneakers echoing against the polished floor. It was 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in December, and the emergency room was buzzing with the chaotic energy she knew so well. "Elena, trauma 2 now!" shouted Dr. Matthews, the night shift chief, his words cutting through the air like bullets. "Gunshot wound, multiple perforations, losing a lot of blood." She didn't hesitate. At 28, Elena had seen everything in those corridors, from devastating car accidents to heartbreaking overdoses. But when she pushed through the double doors of Trauma 2, what she saw made her stop for a fraction of a second. The man on the gurney was unconscious, his angular face marked by a scar that ran from his left temple to his chin. Even injured and pale, there was something magnetic about him, a presence that filled the room even in his vulnerable state. His dark hair was matted to his forehead with sweat and blood, and Elena could see tattoos extending across his muscular arms. "Who brought him in?" Elena asked as she began checking vital signs, her hands working with automatic precision. "2 men in suits," replied Jake, the paramedic, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Said they found him like this on a street in North End. Didn't want to give more details and ran off when we got here." North End. Elena knew that neighborhood. It was Torino family territory, one of Boston's most powerful criminal organizations. Her stomach tightened. She had sworn to herself, after what happened to her brother Miguel, that she would never get involved with that kind of people again. "Blood pressure 80/50 and dropping," she announced, forcing herself to focus on the work. "We need type O negative blood now." Dr. Matthews took control of the surgery, while Elena prepared the instruments. Her hands trembled slightly, not from professional nervousness, but from an old anger she thought she had buried. 3 years ago, Miguel had been killed in a territorial war between rival families. He was only 19 and was in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Elena, focus!" "Doctor," Matthews brought her back to the present. "I need you to monitor his vital signs while I work on this abdominal wound." For 2 hours they fought to save the stranger's life. Elena watched every movement, every labored breath, every irregular heartbeat on the monitor. There was something disturbing about how she felt connected to this man, as if she knew every line of his face, every scar that marked his skin. When they finally managed to stabilize him, the sun was already beginning to rise over Boston, painting the sky in pink tones that contrasted with the dirty snow on the hospital windows. "Good work, everyone," said Dr. Matthews, removing his surgical gloves. "He'll survive, but he'll need intensive care for the next few days. Elena, can you be responsible for him?" She wanted to refuse. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to pass the case to another nurse. But something in his eyes, even closed, prevented her from saying no. "Of course, doctor." 2 hours later, Elena was organizing medications when she heard a hoarse voice behind her. Where am I?" She turned slowly. His eyes were open. They were a deep green, like the ocean during a storm. Even injured and connected to tubes and monitors, there was an intensity in that gaze that made her swallow hard. "You're at Massachusetts General Hospital," she replied, keeping her voice professional. "You suffered serious gunshot wounds. Do you remember what happened?" He tried to sit up, but Elena immediately placed her hand on his chest to stop him. "Don't move. You lost a lot of blood and are still recovering from surgery." For a moment they stayed like that, her hand on his chest, his eyes fixed on hers. Elena could feel his heart beating strongly under her palm, and something strange happened. For a fraction of a second, all the anger she carried seemed to diminish. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice still weak but carrying natural authority. "Elena Rodriguez. And you?" "Marco," he replied after a pause. "Marco Torino." The surname hit her like a punch to the stomach. "Torino." She pulled her hand back abruptly as if she had touched fire. "You're—" she began, but couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," he said simply, observing the change in her expression. "I am." Elena felt the world spin around her. Marco Torino. She had heard of him, the man who had taken control of the family after his father was murdered 2 years ago. The man who, according to the newspapers, had transformed the organization into an even more efficient and dangerous machine. "My brother," she whispered, the words coming out before she could stop them. "Miguel Rodriguez. He died in a war between you and the Castellanos." Marco closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, there was something different in them, a shadow of what could be remorse. "I remember him," he said quietly. "He shouldn't have been there. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" Elena's voice rose an octave. "My brother was coming home from work. He worked at a pizzeria to help pay for college." "I know," Marco replied, his voice carrying a weight she didn't expect. "And I'm sorry." Elena stood in silence, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. Part of her wanted to scream, wanted to hit him, wanted to make him feel a fraction of the pain she had felt. But another part, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, saw something genuine in his eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked. "Because you saved my life," he replied, "and because you deserve to know who I am before deciding if you want to continue caring for me." Elena looked at him for a long moment. There were so many things she wanted to say, so many questions she wanted to ask. But before she could respond, the door opened and 2 men in suits entered the room. "Boss," said the taller one, a bald man with scars on his hands. "Thank God you're okay." "The Castellanos." "Not here, Tony," Marco interrupted, looking meaningfully at Elena. "Later." Tony followed Marco's gaze and studied Elena with cold, calculating eyes. "Is she trustworthy?" he asked. "She's my nurse," Marco replied firmly, "and you'll treat her with respect." Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way Marco had said that, an absolute authority that admitted no questioning. I need to check on other patients," she said, heading for the door. "Elena," Marco called when she was almost leaving. "Thank you for everything." She didn't respond, but when she reached the corridor, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't know if it was from anger, fear, or something completely different. In the following hours, Elena tried to keep busy with other patients, but her thoughts kept returning to room 314. She had sworn to hate everything Marco Torino represented, but there was something about him that challenged her expectations. The way he had apologized for Miguel, the sincerity in his eyes, the manner in which he had protected her from Tony, none of it fit with the image she had of a mafia boss. When her shift was almost over, Elena decided to check on Marco one last time. She found him awake, looking out the window at the city that stretched below. "How are you feeling?" she asked, checking the monitors. "Better," he replied, turning to look at her. "Elena, can I ask you something?" She nodded hesitantly. "Why did you become a nurse?" The question caught her by surprise. "Why do you want to know?" "Curiosity," he said with a half smile that completely transformed his face. "You have healer's hands. Even knowing who I am, you didn't hesitate to help me." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's my job." "No," he said softly. "It's more than that. I saw the way you cared for me. It wasn't just professional." She remained silent for a moment, fighting against the urge to open up to him. "My grandmother," she said finally. "She died when I was 16. Cancer. I spent months caring for her, and I saw how nurses made a difference, how they could bring comfort even in the darkest moments." Marco nodded slowly. "And Miguel? Did he support your decision?" The mention of her brother brought back all the pain, but this time she didn't feel the blind rage from before. "He was my biggest supporter," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "He always said I had a gift for caring for people." "He was right," Marco said simply. Elena looked at him, and for a moment she completely forgot who he was. She saw only an injured man who had lost as much as she had, who carried the weight of decisions she couldn't imagine. "I should hate you," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "and I would understand if you did. But I can't," she admitted, the words coming out like a confession, "and that scares me." Marco slowly extended his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Elena took it. Their fingers intertwined, and she felt an electric current run up her arm. "Elena," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I can't change what happened to Miguel, but I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to ensure tragedies like that don't happen again." She looked into his eyes and saw something that surprised her: vulnerability. Marco Torino, the man who commanded a criminal empire, was being completely honest with her. "Why does this matter to you?" she asked. "What I think? Because," he said, gently squeezing her hand, "every time I've woken up in the last 24 hours, the first thing I saw was your face. And for the first time in years, I felt hope." Elena felt her heart race. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory, that every moment she spent with him took her further from everything she had planned for her life. But there was something magnetic about Marco, something that pulled her like a gravitational force. "I need to go," she said finally, reluctantly releasing his hand. "Will you come back tomorrow?" he asked. Elena stopped at the door and looked back. Marco was watching her with an intensity that made her tremble. "Yes," she said, "I'll come back." As she walked through the hospital corridors toward the parking lot, Elena knew her life had changed forever. She had entered that room determined to do her job and leave. But now she carried with her the image of Marco's green eyes and the sensation of his hand in hers. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again over Boston, covering the city with a white blanket that hid all sins and secrets. Elena looked up, letting the icy flakes touch her face, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or if she was about to discover something that would change everything. In room 314, Marco watched the snow through the window, his mind filled with thoughts about the nurse who had saved his life. He had built walls around his heart years ago, but Elena had found a crack he didn't even know existed. And for the first time since taking control of the family, Marco Torino wondered if there was something worth fighting for beyond power and revenge. Elena woke the next morning to the sound of rain beating against the windows of her small apartment in Cambridge. She had slept poorly, her dreams populated by green eyes and bloodied hands. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marco's face, sometimes vulnerable and wounded, sometimes with the cold, calculating expression she imagined he used in his business. While preparing for another shift at the hospital, Elena tried to convince herself that what she had felt the night before was just professional compassion. After all, she had dedicated her career to caring for people, regardless of who they were or what they had done. But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. The drive to Massachusetts General Hospital had never seemed so long. Elena drove through Boston's wet streets, passing through neighborhoods she had known since childhood. When she passed through North End, she involuntarily slowed down, observing the narrow streets where Marco had grown up, where he now commanded an empire built on foundations of violence and loyalty. "You're being an idiot, Elena," she murmured to herself as she parked at the hospital. "He's a criminal. Remember Miguel." But when she arrived at room 314, all her resolutions crumbled. Marco was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing only the hospital gown, trying to reach a water cup on the bedside table. His movements were careful, clearly still feeling pain from his wounds, but there was a determination in every gesture that spoke of an iron will. "You shouldn't be moving so much," said Elena, entering the room and getting the cup for him. "Thank you," he replied, his fingers brushing hers as he took the cup. "I'm not very good at staying still." Elena checked the bandages, noting that the healing was progressing well. Her hands worked with professional efficiency, but she was painfully aware of his proximity, the warmth emanating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with hospital antiseptic. "How did you sleep?" she asked, avoiding looking directly into his eyes. "Not very well," Marco admitted. "I think about many things when I don't have distractions." "What kind of things?" He remained silent for a moment, studying her face. "About you," he said finally, his brutal honesty cutting through the air like a blade. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Marco." "I know it's complicated," he continued, his voice low and intense. "I know who I am and what I represent to you, but I can't stop thinking about the way you looked at me last night, as if you saw something in me that I haven't seen in myself for years." Elena finished checking the bandages and stepped away, creating physical distance between them. but the tension in the air remained palpable. "You don't know me," she said, her voice rougher than intended. "And I don't know you. Not really." "Then get to know me," Marco replied immediately. "Ask me anything." Elena stared at him, seeing the challenge in his eyes. Part of her wanted to run away, but another part, the curious part that had always gotten her into trouble, wanted to accept the challenge. "All right," she said, crossing her arms. "How many people have you killed?" The question came out more direct than she had planned, but Marco didn't flinch. His eyes darkened, and for a moment Elena saw the dangerous man hiding beneath the vulnerability. "Do you want exact numbers or an estimate?" he asked, his voice cold. "I want the truth." Marco remained silent for a long moment, and Elena thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was loaded with a weight she didn't expect. 7, he said. 7 people I killed with my own hands. All of them were men who represented a direct threat to my family, or who had betrayed our trust. Elena felt her stomach turn, but forced herself to maintain eye contact. "And do you feel remorse?" "For some, yes," he admitted. "For others, no. The world is a safer place without them. How can you live with that?" Marco leaned forward, ignoring the pain the movement clearly caused. "Elena, you work in a hospital. You've seen people die, right? Innocent people who didn't deserve to die?" She nodded hesitantly. "And how do you deal with that? How do you keep coming to work every day, knowing you can't always save everyone?" "It's different," she protested. "I'm trying to save lives, not take them. And I'm protecting the people I love," Marco replied. "My family, my men, the people who depend on me. Sometimes that means making choices that other people can't understand." Elena remained silent, processing his words. There was a twisted logic in what he said, a rationalization that scared her because it made sense in a perverse way. "And Miguel?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Was he protecting someone when he died?" Marco's expression changed instantly, the cold mask disappearing to reveal something that seemed genuinely tormented. "No," he said. "Miguel died because I failed to protect innocent people, because I was so focused on winning a war that I forgot about the people who could be caught in the crossfire." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "Were you there when he died?" "I arrived 5 minutes later," Marco replied, his voice breaking slightly. "I held him while he died. He asked me to take care of his sister." Elena's world stopped. "What?" "He said he had a sister who was a nurse, that she was the most important person in the world to him. He made me promise that if something happened to him, I would ensure you stayed safe." Elena felt her legs weaken and leaned against the wall. "You're lying." "I would never lie about this," Marco said, getting up from the bed despite the visible pain. "Elena, I spent 2 years looking for you. I wanted to fulfill the promise I made to your brother, but you had moved, changed your name at work. When you said your name yesterday, I almost couldn't believe it." "This is impossible," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew it was true. There was something in the way Marco spoke, a brutal sincerity that couldn't be faked. "He told me you always wanted to work at Mass General," Marco continued, approaching slowly. "That it was your dream since childhood. He said you were stubborn, brave, and had a heart too big for your own good." Elena began to cry, years of pain and anger finally finding an outlet. Marco hesitated for a moment, then pulled her into his arms, ignoring the pain from his wounds. "I'm sorry," he murmured against her hair. "I'm sorry I didn't arrive in time. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner." Elena allowed herself to cry against his chest, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. For a moment, she forgot who he was, forgot everything except the sensation of finally having someone who understood her pain. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red but determined. "If you're telling the truth," she said, "if Miguel really asked for this, then I need to know everything. I need to know exactly what happened that night." Marco nodded gravely. "I'll tell you everything, but not here. It's too dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Before Marco could answer, the door opened abruptly. Tony, the bald man from yesterday, entered the room with an urgent expression. "Boss, we have a problem," he said, stopping abruptly when he saw Elena in Marco's arms. "Sorry, I didn't know you were busy." Marco stepped away from Elena, but kept a protective hand on her back. "What happened, Tony?" "The Castellanos, they know you're here. Our informants say they're planning something for tonight." Elena felt her blood freeze. "Are they going to attack the hospital?" "No," Marco replied quickly. "They're not stupid enough for that. But they might try to get me when I leave here." "Then don't leave," Elena said immediately. "You're still recovering. You can stay a few more days." Tony laughed bitterly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, the boss can't hide in a hospital forever. That would show weakness." "And dying would show what?" Elena retorted, her voice loaded with sarcasm. Marco looked between the two, and Elena saw the exact moment he made a decision. "Tony, I want you to organize a distraction," he said. "Make it look like I'm being transferred to another hospital tonight. Use one of the armored cars. Put someone my height on the gurney." "And you?" Tony asked. "I'll leave another way." Elena felt a chill in her stomach. "Marco, this is madness. You can barely walk." "I don't have a choice," he replied, turning to her. "Elena, I need you to understand. If I stay here, I'm not just putting my life at risk. I'm putting yours at risk too." "Mine?" "The Castellanos have no scruples," Tony explained, his voice somber. "If they find out you mean something to the boss, they'll use you against him." Elena felt the world spin around her. In less than 48 hours, her life had completely transformed. She had gone from an ordinary nurse to someone who was at the center of a war between criminal families. "I can't let you leave here alone," she said finally. "Not in your condition." "Elena." "No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "If you're going to leave, I'm going with you. At least until I'm sure you're safe." Tony looked at Marco with an expression that clearly said, "I warned you she'd be trouble." "It's very dangerous," Marco said softly. "My life is already in danger, isn't it?" Elena replied. "You said so yourself, so I'd rather be where I can make a difference." Marco studied her for a long moment, and Elena saw a battle happening in his eyes, the desire to protect her fighting against the need to have her close. "All right," he said finally, "but you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No questions." Elena nodded, though part of her wondered what she was getting herself into. "Tony, set everything up for 11 p.m., Marco continued, "and make sure we have a clean escape route." "Yes, boss." After Tony left, Elena and Marco were alone again. The tension in the air had changed. It was no longer just attraction and emotional conflict, but something more dangerous and immediate. "Elena," Marco said, taking her hands, "are you sure about this? Once you leave here with me, there's no going back. Your life will change forever." Elena looked into his eyes and saw fear, not for himself, but for her. And in that moment she knew she had already made her decision long ago. "My life already changed," she said. "The moment you told me about Miguel, the moment I realized you're not the monster I imagined. I need to know the truth, Marco, all of it." He brought her hand to his lips and gently kissed her fingers. "Then tonight, you'll know my world," he said, "and I pray you won't regret it." As Elena finished her shift, preparing for a night that would change everything, she couldn't help but think of Miguel's words that Marco had repeated. She had a heart too big for her own good. Maybe it was true, but as she looked at Marco, seeing the way he tried to hide the pain from his wounds, the way his eyes followed her every time she moved around the room, Elena knew she couldn't abandon him now. Not when she had finally found someone who understood her pain. Not when there was a chance, however small, of finding something real amid all that chaos. The night promised answers, but Elena suspected it would also bring questions she didn't even know she should ask. At 10:30 p.m., Massachusetts General Hospital was immersed in the typical quiet of the night shift. Elena had changed from her nurse's uniform into dark jeans and a black coat, her hands trembling slightly as she helped Marco get dressed. He had insisted on wearing his own clothes, a dark suit that Tony had brought earlier, despite Elena's protests that it was still too early for such restrictive clothing. "Are you sure you can do this?" she asked for the 10th time, watching Marco wince in pain as he buttoned his shirt. "Elena, I've been shot before," he said with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is nothing compared to what I've been through." She wanted to ask about the other times, about the scars she had seen on his body, but the sound of footsteps in the corridor made her fall silent. Tony appeared at the door, dressed like a maintenance technician. "Everything's ready," he said in a low voice. "The distraction will start in 5 minutes. You have a 15-minute window to get out." Marco nodded and turned to Elena. "Last chance to change your mind." Elena looked at him, at the man who had become the center of a whirlwind of emotions she could barely comprehend. There was fear, yes, but also a determination she hadn't felt in years. "I'm not changing my mind," she said firmly. The plan was simple in its complexity. While a convoy of armored cars left through the hospital's main entrance, creating the illusion that Marco was being transferred, they would escape through the emergency exit at the back. Tony had disabled the security cameras in a specific section of the hospital, creating a blind spot that would last exactly 17 minutes. Elena followed Marco through the service corridors she knew like the back of her hand. Her years working at the hospital had given her intimate knowledge of every passage, every emergency staircase, every alternative route. But now, walking beside Marco, everything seemed different, darker, more dangerous. "This way," she whispered, guiding him down a staircase that led to the basement. "This exit goes directly to the staff parking lot." Marco followed her, his movements still careful but determined. Elena could see he was fighting against pain, but she also noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the environment, always alert for possible threats. When they reached the exit, Tony was already waiting with a discreet black sedan. It wasn't the kind of car Elena would expect from a mafia boss. No bulletproof glass or special plates, just a common Honda Accord that would easily blend into Boston traffic. "Smart," Elena murmured as they got into the car. "Sometimes the best way to hide is not to look like you're hiding," Marco replied, settling carefully in the back seat beside her. Tony drove through Boston streets with the skill of someone who knew every alley, every shortcut, every escape route in the city. Elena watched through the window, seeing her hometown from a completely new perspective. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every car that followed them for more than 2 blocks made her tense. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a safe place," Marco replied, "where I can tell you everything about that night." 20 minutes later, they stopped in front of an apartment building in Beacon Hill. It was an elegant but discreet building, the kind of place where wealthy people lived without drawing attention. Tony carefully checked the street before signaling for them to get out of the car. The apartment on the 5th floor was surprisingly normal. Elena had expected something ostentatious, full of gold and marble, but instead found a modern and minimalist space with tasteful furniture and a stunning view of the city. "This is my refuge," Marco explained, noticing her surprise. "Only a few people know it exists." Elena walked to the window, observing Boston's lights stretching to the horizon. "It's beautiful." "Elena," Marco said behind her, his voice serious, "before I tell you about Miguel, you need to understand some things about my world." She turned to face him. Marco had sat on the sofa, clearly still feeling pain, but his eyes were focused and determined. "The Torino family isn't like the other organizations you see in movies," he began. "My grandfather built our business based on 3 principles: loyalty, protection, and justice. We don't sell drugs to children. We don't exploit women. We don't harm innocents." "But you're still criminals," Elena pointed out. "Yes," Marco admitted. "We control gambling, loans, some construction businesses that aren't completely legal, but always with rules, always with limits." Elena sat in the armchair across from him. "And the Castellanos?" Marco's expression darkened. "The Castellanos have no rules. They see our moderation is weakness. 2 years ago, they decided they wanted our territory, and a war began." "A war began," Marco confirmed. "My father tried to resolve things peacefully. He believed there was always a way to negotiate, to find middle ground." "What happened to him?" Marco remained silent for a long moment, and Elena saw pain cross his face. "They killed him during a peace meeting," he said finally. "He went to meet with Salvatore Castellano to discuss a ceasefire. Salvatore shot him point blank and left the body in the street as a warning." Elena felt her stomach turn. "My God." When I took control of the family, I had two choices, Marco continued. I could continue trying to make peace, or I could show the Castellanos they had made a fatal mistake. You chose war. I chose to protect my family, Marco corrected. But yes, that meant war. Elena processed his words, trying to reconcile the vulnerable man she had met at the hospital with the ruthless leader he was describing. And Miguel got caught in the middle of it, she said. Marco nodded gravely. The night Miguel died, we had received information that the Castellanos were planning an attack on one of our warehouses in North End. It was a trap. They wanted to lure us there. But you went anyway. I went, Marco said, with 6 of my best men. We thought we were prepared for anything. Elena leaned forward, her heart beating faster. What happened? When we got there, we realized it was an ambush. There were at least 20 men waiting for us. We fought, but they had the numerical and positional advantage. Marco stopped, running his hand through his hair, clearly reliving painful memories. During the shootout, I saw a civilian car approaching the combat zone. It was Miguel, coming home from work. He had no idea what was happening. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I tried to reach him, Marco continued, his voice breaking. But there were too many shooters between us. I saw when a stray bullet hit his car's tire, making it skid and crash into a wall. And then I did something stupid, Marco admitted. I left cover and ran to his car, completely exposing myself. My men covered me, but 2 of them died in the process. Elena closed her eyes, imagining the scene. Marco risking everything to try to save a stranger. When I reached Miguel, he was seriously injured. There was glass everywhere, and he was losing a lot of blood. I tried to stop the bleeding, but it was too late, Elena finished. He was dying, and we both knew it, Marco said. But he wasn't afraid. He was worried about you. Elena began to cry silently, years of pain finally finding an outlet. He told me your name, told me you were a nurse, that you two had no one else in the world but each other. He made me promise I would ensure your safety. Why would you make such a promise to a stranger? Elena asked through her tears. Marco got up from the sofa, ignoring the pain, and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. Because I saw in his eyes the same love I felt for my family, he said. And because I knew that if I couldn't save him, at least I could try to save the person he loved most in the world. Elena looked into his eyes and saw absolute truth. There was no lie, no manipulation, just a man who had carried the weight of a promise for 2 years. You really looked for me, she said. I hired private investigators, hacked hospital records, followed every lead I could find. But you had moved after Miguel's death, changed your surname at work to Rodriguez Santos. It took almost a year for me to find out where you were. And then I discovered you were working at Mass General, exactly where Miguel said you always wanted to work. I started to watch you. Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. You followed me. I wanted to make sure you were safe, Marco explained quickly. And I wanted to find the right way to approach you. How could I just show up and say, "Hi, I'm the mafia boss who was present when your brother died"? Elena laughed through her tears, a bitter and ironic sound. So you decided to get shot and show up at my hospital. That wasn't planned, Marco said with a half smile. That was just fate having a very strange sense of humor. Elena remained silent for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. There were so many emotions running through her. Pain at the confirmation of how Miguel had died, anger at the years of war that had led to his death, but also something more, gratitude. You risked your life to try to save my brother, she said finally. And I failed, Marco replied. But you tried, and you kept your promise to him. Marco squeezed her hands. Elena, I know this doesn't bring Miguel back. I know nothing I do can compensate for what you lost. But I want you to know that his death changed something in me. How so? After that night, I changed the rules, Marco explained. No operations happen near residential areas. No confrontations in places where civilians could be hurt. And anyone from my men who puts innocents in danger answers directly to me. Elena studied his face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. And the Castellanos? Is the war over? Marco's expression darkened. No. If anything, it intensified. They saw my new rules as weakness and increased their attacks. That's why I was in such a dangerous situation last night. What exactly happened? False information again, Marco said with bitterness. Someone told me Salvatore Castellano would be alone at a restaurant in North End. It was another trap, but this time I was prepared. Unfortunately, not prepared enough. Elena gently touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar that ran from his temple to his chin. This scar, she said, it's old. A gift from Salvatore himself. 3 years ago, Marco explained. First time we met face to face. And you let him live? At that time, yes. I still believed I could resolve things without more bloodshed. And now? Marco covered her hand with his, pressing it against his face. Now I know some people only understand one language, he said. And Salvatore Castellano needs to be stopped before more innocents die. Elena felt a chill in her stomach. You're going to kill him. I'm going to do whatever is necessary to protect my family and the people I love. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Elena knew Marco had included her in that category, the people he loved, and the realization hit her like lightning. Marco, she said softly, you can't solve violence with more violence. There will always be another Salvatore, another family wanting revenge. Then what do you suggest, he asked, that I just let them kill me? That I let them destroy everything my grandfather and father built? Elena didn't have an easy answer. She knew Marco's world was governed by rules she didn't fully understand, where weakness could mean death not just for him, but for everyone who depended on him. I don't know, she admitted, but I know you're better than them. You proved that when you tried to save Miguel, when you changed your rules, when you spent 2 years looking for me to fulfill a promise. Marco got up and walked to the window, looking at the city below. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I had been born into a different family, he said. If I could just be a normal man, with a normal job, who could take a woman like you to dinner without worrying if someone was going to try to kill us. Elena got up and went to him, placing her hand on his back. But you weren't born into a different family, she said, and I didn't fall in love with a normal man. Marco turned quickly, his eyes wide. What did you say? Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, realizing what she had just admitted. She began, but Marco interrupted her, pulling her into his arms. Say it again, he asked, his voice rough with emotion. I fell in love with you, Elena whispered. I know it's crazy, I know it's dangerous, but I can't help it. Marco kissed her then, a desperate kiss full of passion that spoke of all the feelings they had been repressing. Elena melted against him, temporarily forgetting all the dangers, all the complications, everything except the sensation of being in the arms of the man she loved. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Elena, Marco said, resting his forehead against hers. I love you too, more than I thought it was possible to love someone. Then we'll find a way to make this work, she said with determination. Together, Marco smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him, and Elena knew that no matter what challenges awaited them, they would face them together. But outside, in the shadows of Beacon Hill, hostile eyes watched the building and dark plans began to take shape. The war was far from over, and Elena was about to discover that loving Marco Torino meant becoming a target. Elena woke to the sound of rain beating against the windows of Marco's apartment. For a moment, she felt disoriented, not recognizing the luxurious environment around her. Then the memories of the previous night came back like an avalanche. The escape from the hospital, the revelations about Miguel, the confession of love that had changed everything. She turned in bed and found Marco already awake, watching her with an intensity that made her blush. Even in the soft morning light, he was devastatingly handsome, his dark hair tousled from sleep, the scar on his face only accentuating his masculinity. Good morning, he said, his voice rough from sleep. Good morning, Elena replied, suddenly conscious that she was wearing only one of his shirts. What time is it? Almost 9, Marco replied, extending his hand to touch her face. Did you sleep well? Elena nodded, though the truth was she had woken several times during the night, still processing everything she had discovered. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Miguel's face, heard Marco's words about that terrible night. Marco, she said, covering his hand with hers. About last night. I don't regret what I said, what we did. But, he asked, clearly detecting hesitation in her voice, but I need to know what this means. For us, for my life, for everything. Marco sat up in bed, running his hand through his hair, a gesture Elena was beginning to recognize as a sign that he was thinking deeply. Elena, I won't lie to you, he said finally. Being with me means your life will change completely. It means you'll always have to look over your shoulder, always have to worry about your safety. And if I say I'm willing to accept that, then I'll do everything in my power to protect you, Marco replied without hesitation. But you need to understand that my enemies won't hesitate to use you against me. As if his words were prophetic, Marco's phone rang at that moment. He looked at the screen, and his expression immediately hardened. Tony, he said as he answered. What happened? Elena watched Marco's face change as he listened, seeing anger and concern intensify in his eyes. When? He asked, his voice cold as ice. How many men? I understand. No, don't do anything until I get there. And Tony? Double security at all our locations. He hung up the phone and turned to Elena, his expression somber. What happened? She asked, though she already knew it wouldn't be good news. The Castellanos attacked one of our warehouses during the early hours, Marco explained, getting up from bed and starting to dress. They killed 2 of my men and took a large amount of money. Elena felt her stomach turn. Do they know you weren't at the hospital? Apparently, yes. The attack was very well coordinated, very specific. They knew exactly where to attack and when. What does this mean? Marco stopped dressing and looked at her, his eyes filled with a cold determination that scared her. It means someone is passing information to them, someone close enough to know our movements. Elena got up from bed, pulling his shirt down to cover herself better. Marco, you can't leave now. What if it's another trap? I have to go, he said, approaching her and placing his hands on her shoulders. My men are waiting for me. They need to see that I'm okay, that I'm still in control. Then I'm going with you. Absolutely not, Marco replied immediately. Elena, this is exactly the kind of situation I was talking about. You can't expose yourself like this. And you can't leave me here alone, she retorted. If they know about this apartment... Marco stopped, clearly not having thought of that. He picked up the phone again and dialed quickly. Tony, I need you to send 2 men to the safe house, now. Yes, she'll stay there until we resolve this. Understood. He hung up and turned to Elena. You're going to stay in a safe location until I resolve this situation. For how long? For as long as necessary. Elena felt a wave of claustrophobia. Marco, I can't just disappear. I have a job, a life. Do you think your life is worth less than your job? He asked, his voice rising slightly. I think I can't live in hiding forever. They stood staring at each other for a moment, tension growing between them. Elena could see the frustration in Marco's eyes, but she also saw fear. Fear for her. Elena, he said finally, his voice softer. I almost lost you before I even found you. I won't risk losing you now. Before Elena could respond, they heard the sound of cars stopping on the street. Marco immediately moved to the window, carefully peering through the curtains. Shit, he muttered. They found us. Elena felt her blood freeze. Who? 3 black cars, at least 12 men. Definitely Castellano. Marco moved quickly, grabbing a pistol from a drawer and checking the magazine. Elena, get dressed, now. She didn't question, grabbing her clothes and dressing quickly while Marco spoke urgently on the phone. Tony, we're surrounded at the apartment. Yes, they found the location. How long? All right, we'll try to hold out. He hung up and turned to Elena. My men are 15 minutes away. We need to hold out until then. And if we can't? Marco pulled her into his arms, kissing her intensely. We will, he said against her lips. I promise. The sound of heavy footsteps on the stairs made them separate. Marco pushed Elena behind a sofa and positioned himself near the door, gun in hand. "When I say so, you run to the bedroom and lock yourself in the bathroom," he whispered. "There's a window there that leads to the building next door. If something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," Elena interrupted fiercely. The sound of someone working on the lock made them fall silent. Marco gestured for Elena to duck lower, his muscles tense like a spring about to be released. The door opened slowly, and Elena held her breath. But instead of the Castellano men she expected, Tony entered the apartment, followed by two other men she recognized from the hospital. "Boss," said Tony, clearly relieved. "Thank God you're okay. How did you get here so fast?" Marco asked, lowering his weapon but not completely relaxing. "We were already on our way when you called," Tony explained. "And it's lucky we were. The Castellanos are surrounding the building." Elena got up from behind the sofa, her heart still beating wildly. "How many are there?" Marco asked. "At least 15, maybe more. They have the whole building surrounded." Marco walked to the window again, observing the situation below. "They won't attack in broad daylight," he said thoughtfully. "Too risky, too many witnesses. They'll wait." "Wait for what?" Elena asked. "For it to get dark, or for us to try to leave." Tony approached Marco, his expression serious. "Boss, there's something else. We found out who's leaking information." Marco turned quickly. "Who?" "Frankie Rossi." Elena saw Marco's expression change completely. Surprise, anger, and something that looked like personal pain. "Frankie?" he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Are you sure?" "Absolute. We intercepted a call from him to Salvatore this morning. He was passing information about your movements." Marco leaned against the wall, clearly shaken. Elena approached him, touching his arm. "Who is Frankie?" she asked softly. "My cousin," Marco replied, his voice loaded with bitterness. "Son of my father's brother. I grew up with him, trusted him with my life. Why would he do this? Money, probably. Or maybe he believes the Castellanos will win this war." Tony cleared his throat. "Boss, we need to decide what to do. We can't stay here forever." Marco straightened his shoulders, and Elena saw the exact moment he returned to leader mode. "How many men do we have available?" 12, counting the 3 of us. "And they have 15 or more." "Yes, but we have the advantage of position. And they don't know how many we are." Marco remained silent for a moment, clearly calculating options. "Is there a way to get out of here without confrontation?" he asked. "The roof," said one of Tony's men. "We can reach the building next door and go down from there." "And Elena?" "I'm going with you," she said immediately. "Elena?" "No," she interrupted. "Don't leave me here. If you're going to risk your lives, I'm going to risk mine too." Marco looked at her for a long moment, and Elena saw a battle happening in his eyes. "All right," he said finally. "But you do exactly what I say when I say it." Elena nodded, though her stomach was churning with fear. "Tony, you and Sal go first. Make sure the path is clear. Marco and I will follow." While the men prepared, Marco pulled Elena to a corner. "Elena, I need you to know something," he said, his voice urgent. "If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If something happens," he continued, ignoring her interruption, "Tony will take care of you. He has instructions to take you to a safe place, away from Boston." "Marco, stop talking like that." He took her face in his hands. "I love you," he said intensely, "more than my own life. And that's why I need you to promise you'll stay safe, no matter what happens." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "And that's why we're getting out of this together." "Boss," Tony called them. "It's time." Marco kissed Elena one last time, a desperate kiss that spoke of love and fear and determination. "Let's go," he said, taking her hand. They went up to the roof through an emergency staircase, the cold December wind cutting through their clothes. Elena could see the Castellano men positioned around the building, waiting patiently like predators. The distance to the building next door seemed larger than she had imagined, at least 2 meters of open space over a 5-story abyss. "Can you do this?" Marco asked, noticing her hesitation. Elena looked at him, seeing the concern in his eyes, and found courage she didn't know she possessed. "Yes," she said. I can do it." Tony and Sal jumped first, landing safely on the neighboring building's roof. Then it was Elena's turn. "I'll be right behind you," Marco said, squeezing her hand. Elena took a deep breath, ran, and jumped. For a terrifying moment, she felt like she was flying, the wind roaring in her ears. Then Tony's hands caught her, pulling her to safety. Marco jumped next, landing gracefully despite his still healing wounds. "Now the hard part," Tony murmured. They descended the building using a fire escape, each step echoing in the cold morning air. Elena could feel her heart beating so hard, she was sure everyone could hear it. When they finally reached street level, Tony checked carefully before signaling for them to come out. "The car is 2 blocks from here," he whispered. They walked quickly through the streets of Beacon Hill, trying to look casual despite the tension everyone felt. Elena kept her eyes fixed on the ground, afraid that if she looked around, she would see Castellano men on every corner. They were almost at the car when Elena heard Marco curse softly behind her. "What is it?" she asked, turning around. "We were followed," he said, his eyes fixed on something behind her. Elena turned and saw 3 men in suits walking toward them, their intentions clearly hostile. "Run!" Marco said, pushing Elena forward. But it was too late. More men appeared in front of them, blocking their escape route. They were surrounded. "Marco Torino," said a familiar voice behind them. They turned to see a tall, thin man approaching, a cruel smile on his face. Elena didn't need introductions to know who he was. There was something in his eyes that spoke of a cruelty that went beyond simple violence. "Salvatore Castellano," Marco said, his voice cold as ice. "In person," Salvatore replied, stopping a few meters away. "And you must be the famous nurse who saved our friend's life here." Elena felt her blood freeze when Salvatore's eyes fixed on her. "Leave her out of this, Salvatore," Marco said, stepping forward to place himself between Elena and Salvatore. "Oh, but she's already in it, isn't she?" Salvatore laughed. "From the moment she chose to get involved with you, she became part of the game." "What do you want?" Marco asked. "What I've always wanted," Salvatore replied. "Your territory, your businesses, and your life. But now I have something even better, a way to make you suffer before you die." Elena saw realization cross Marco's face, and her stomach turned. "If you touch her," Marco began, his voice loaded with a deadly threat. "You'll do what?" Salvatore interrupted. "You're surrounded, outnumbered, and far from your men. You're not in a position to make threats." Elena looked around, counting the Castellano men. There were at least 8 of them, all armed, all with the cold expression of professional killers. "But I'm a reasonable man," Salvatore continued, "so I'll make an offer. You come with me voluntarily, and I'll let your little girlfriend live." "No," Elena said immediately. "Marco, don't do this." "Elena, be quiet," Marco said without taking his eyes off Salvatore. "How touching," Salvatore commented. "True love. What a shame it's going to have such a tragic ending." "I accept," Marco said suddenly. "Marco, no!" Elena screamed, trying to move toward him, but Tony held her back. "Smart," Salvatore said, signaling to his men. "But there's an additional condition. You come unarmed." Marco slowly removed his pistol and placed it on the ground. "Marco, please," Elena begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't do this." He turned to her, and Elena saw in his eyes all the love he felt, but also an unshakable determination. "I love you," he said simply. "Remember that." Then he walked towards Salvatore, each step taking him further from her. "Very good," Salvatore said when Marco approached. "Now about the girl." "You said you'd let her live," Marco said, his voice tense. "I said I'd let her live," Salvatore agreed. "I didn't say I'd let her go." Elena saw horror cross Marco's face the moment he realized he had been deceived. "You son of a bitch!" Marco roared, trying to move towards Salvatore. But Castellano's men were faster, holding Marco before he could reach his target. "Take them both," Salvatore ordered. "We're going to have a little party tonight." As rough hands grabbed her, Elena heard Marco screaming her name, saw the pain and rage in his eyes, and she knew that despite all the love they shared, It might not be enough to save them from the fate that awaited them. The war had reached them, and now both were prisoners in a deadly game where the rules were written in blood. The abandoned warehouse in South Boston smelled of rancid oil and despair. Elena was tied to a metal chair in the center of the cavernous space, her wrists already raw from trying to break free. A few meters from her, Marco was chained to a steel beam, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead, where one of Salvatore's men had struck him. 6 hours had passed since they were captured. 6 hours of psychological torture, with Salvatore alternating between veiled threats and explicit violence. Elena had lost count of how many times Marco had tried to break free from the chains, his wrists now bleeding from the wounds he had inflicted on himself. "You know," said Salvatore, walking slowly around Elena, "I always wondered what it would take to break Marco Torino. Money? No. Power? Definitely not. But love?" He stopped behind her chair, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Love is an interesting weakness." "Take your dirty hands off her," Marco roared, pulling the chains with such force that Elena could hear the metal protesting. "Or what?" Salvatore laughed, squeezing Elena's shoulders until she grimaced in pain. "You'll kill me? From where you are?" Elena forced herself to keep her head up, refusing to show fear. In her years as a nurse, she had seen the worst of humanity: domestic violence, overdoses, senseless deaths. But nothing had prepared her for the cold cruelty she saw in Salvatore's eyes. "Elena," Marco said, his voice softer now. "Look at me." She turned her head, meeting his green eyes. Even injured and chained, there was a strength in him that calmed her. "Remember what we talked about regarding my grandfather?" he asked. "About the 3 principles?" Elena nodded, confused about why he was bringing this up now. "Loyalty, protection, and justice," she whispered. "That's right. And do you know which is the most important?" Before Elena could answer, Salvatore slapped the back of her head. "Enough romantic talk," he said. "We have business to settle." Salvatore walked to a table where he had arranged a variety of tools that Elena preferred not to identify. When he picked up a knife, she felt her stomach turn. "Now, Marco," said Salvatore, testing the blade's edge with his thumb, "let's discuss the terms of your surrender. First, you'll sign all your territories over to me. Second, you'll order all your men to join my organization. And third," he approached Elena with the knife, "third, you'll watch while I have some fun with your girlfriend." "I'm going to kill you," Marco said, his voice so cold and deadly that even some of Salvatore's men seemed uncomfortable. "I'm going to kill you slowly, and you'll beg for death long before I'm finished with you." "Big words for a chained man," Salvatore replied, placing the knife's tip against Elena's neck. Elena closed her eyes, preparing for pain, but instead, she heard the sound of breaking glass and shouts coming from outside the warehouse. "What the hell?" Salvatore began, but was interrupted by the sound of gunshots. The warehouse door exploded inward, and Tony came running in, followed by at least a dozen armed men. The shootout that followed was intense, but brief. Salvatore's men, caught by surprise, were quickly overwhelmed. "Boss!" Tony shouted, running toward Marco while other men surrounded Salvatore. "Elena first," Marco ordered, even as Tony worked to free him from the chains. 2 men quickly cut the ropes binding Elena, and she ran to Marco the moment he was freed. He pulled her into his arms, ignoring the visible pain from his wounds. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hands running over her face, checking if she was hurt. "I'm fine," she whispered against his chest. "How did you find us?" "GPS in my watch," Marco explained. "Tony was tracking our location." Elena pulled back slightly to look at him. "You knew this was going to happen." "I hoped it wouldn't, but I prepared for the possibility." Salvatore, now disarmed and surrounded, laughed bitterly. "Very smart, Marco. But this doesn't change anything. This war won't end with me. There are others who will continue fighting." Marco approached Salvatore, his expression deadly. "You're right," he said. "This war won't end with you. It will end because of you." Elena saw something change in Marco's eyes, a decision being made that she knew would change everything. Tony, Marco said without taking his eyes off Salvatore. Call all the family bosses in Boston. Tell them I'm calling a meeting tonight. Boss, are you sure? Tony asked. After what happened, especially after what happened, Marco replied. It's time to end this once and for all. Salvatore frowned. What are you planning? Marco smiled, but there was no humor in that smile. You'll find out. 3 hours later, Elena was in Marco's private office in a downtown Boston building she didn't know existed. It was an elegant but functional space, with a panoramic view of the city. Marco had insisted she stay there while he prepared for the meeting, but Elena could see he was nervous. Marco, she said, watching him adjust his tie for the 5th time. What are you planning to do? He stopped and turned to her, his eyes serious. Something I should have done a long time ago. That's not an answer. Marco approached her, taking her hands. Elena, you made me realize something today. When I saw Salvatore with that knife at your throat, when I thought I might lose you, I understood that this life, this constant war, isn't worth it if it means putting the people I love in danger. Elena felt her heart race. What are you saying? I'm saying it's time to change. Not just the rules, but the entire game. Before Elena could ask what he meant, Tony entered the office. Boss, everyone's here. They're waiting in the conference room. Marco nodded and turned to Elena. I want you to stay here. No matter what happens, don't leave this room until I come back. Marco? He kissed her. A soft kiss, but full of meaning. Trust me, he said. After tonight, everything will be different. Elena watched him leave, her heart heavy with foreboding. She walked to the window looking at the city below and wondered if she was about to lose the man she loved to the world he was trying to leave behind. In the conference room, Marco looked around the table at the faces of the 5 most powerful family bosses in Boston. Salvatore sat between 2 guards, his hands cuffed, but his eyes still defiant. Gentlemen, Marco began, his voice echoing in the tense silence. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Marco, said Vincent Marconi, the oldest boss present. We heard about what happened today. Salvatore crossed a line. Yes, he did, Marco agreed. But we're not here just to talk about Salvatore. We're here to talk about the future. What kind of future? Asked another boss. Marco took a deep breath, knowing the next words would change everything. A future where our families don't have to live in constant war. A future where we can prosper without unnecessary bloodshed. Salvatore laughed. You've gone soft, Marco. That nurse made you weak. No, Marco replied calmly. She made me stronger, strong enough to do what needs to be done. He turned to the other bosses. I'm proposing an alliance, not just a temporary ceasefire, but a true partnership. We divide territories fairly, establish clear rules about what's acceptable and what isn't, and create a council to resolve disputes without violence. The silence in the room was deafening. And if someone breaks these rules, asked Vincent, then all the others unite against them, Marco replied. Unified force against anyone who threatens the peace. This is ridiculous, Salvatore spat. You're criminals, not politicians. This peace fantasy won't last. Marco turned to Salvatore, his eyes cold. You're right about one thing, Salvatore. We are criminals. But that doesn't mean we have to be animals. He looked around the table again. Gentlemen, I know this is a radical change, but think about your families, your children. Do you want them to grow up in the same cycle of violence we grew up in? Vincent leaned forward. And what happens to Salvatore? Marco looked at the man who had tormented his life for so long. Salvatore has a choice. He can accept the new rules and keep a small part of his territory under supervision or, Salvatore asked, though Elena knew he already knew the answer, or he can be permanently banished from Boston. Any attempt to return will result in unified action from all families. You can't banish me from my own city, Salvatore roared. I can if we all agree, Marco replied. And considering you kidnapped and threatened to torture an innocent civilian, I think everyone will agree you've lost the right to be here. One by one, the bosses around the table nodded. Salvatore looked around, realizing he was completely isolated. You'll regret this, he said. All of you. Maybe, Marco admitted. but at least we'll regret it in peace." 2 hours later, Marco returned to his office to find Elena asleep on the sofa. She had wrapped herself in his coat, and in the soft lamplight she looked almost ethereal. He sat carefully beside her, gently touching her face. Elena woke slowly, her eyes focusing on him. "How did it go?" she asked, sitting up. "Better than I expected," Marco replied. Everyone agreed to the alliance. Salvatore was banished from Boston. Elena studied his face. But nothing is guaranteed. It might work, it might not. Only time will tell. Elena took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "And us? What happens to us?" Marco smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in days. "We try to build something real, something Miguel would be proud of." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "Do you think he would approve? The two of us together?" "I think he'd be happy to know you found someone who loves you enough to change his entire life for you." Elena leaned in and kissed him, a kiss full of promise and hope. "I love you, Marco Torino," she whispered against his lips. "And I love you, Elena Rodriguez," he replied. "Forever." 6 months later, Elena stood on the balcony of the apartment they now shared in Back Bay, watching the sun set over Boston. The city seemed different now, more peaceful somehow. The alliance Marco had forged was working better than anyone had expected. Marco had gradually stepped away from the darker aspects of his business, focusing on legitimate investments and community projects. Elena had returned to the hospital, but now also worked at a free clinic that Marco had funded in North End. "What are you thinking about?" asked Marco, appearing behind her and wrapping her in his arms. "About how life can change," Elena replied, leaning against him. "A year ago I hated everything you represented. Now I can't imagine my life without you." Marco kissed the top of her head. "Elena, there's something I want to ask you." She turned in his arms, seeing something nervous in his eyes. "What is it?" Marco stepped back slightly and, to her surprise, knelt down. When he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, Elena felt her heart stop. "Elena Rodriguez," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You saved me in more ways than I can count. You showed me it's possible to be strong without being cruel, that it's possible to lead with the heart instead of just with fear." Elena covered her mouth with her hands, tears already streaming down her face. "Will you marry me?" he asked, opening the box to reveal a simple but stunning ring. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, I will." Marco stood up and kissed her, spinning her in the air as she laughed through her tears. When they finally separated, Elena looked at the ring on her finger, and then at the man who had changed her life forever. "Miguel would be happy," she said. "Yes," Marco agreed. He would be. As the sun finished setting over Boston, Elena knew her journey with Marco was just beginning. There would be challenges, there would be difficult moments, but they would face everything together. She had started by hating the mafia boss who represented everything she despised, but she had ended up loving the man he became, a man who had chosen love over hate, peace over war, and her over everything else. And in that moment, with the city stretching before them and the future full of possibilities, Elena knew that sometimes the best love stories begin in the most unlikely places, between the most different people, and flourish even amid chaos. Love had won, and for Elena and Marco, this was just the beginning.